Hello, assalamu alaikum guys, and welcome to a new tutorial. And this is my first tutorial on C language. So basically in this tutorial I will tell you the basic fundamentals of C language. So the C language is one of the very first, or you can say very best languages of computer world, and it got really good stuff and it can help you make real good programs as well. So we will start our lecture with some basic slides for all of you, and in these slides I have written some very basics of C languages. This can take a little long because there is about 40 different pages on the fundamentals of C language, and in this video I will also tell you how to make some of the basic codes and functions and programs of C languages. So this is almost, you can say, the start, and the IDE are going to use the software, or you can say the integrated development environment are going to use to write this C language codes is Xcode on Mac OS X, and you might use any other software on any other operating system such as Windows or Linux or Unix, Ubuntu, etc. So let's start with our C fundamentals. C got a character set, the words or symbols C language can use. It includes language from A to Z, and C language is case sensitive, which means a capital A or a small a both have different values and work differently. They are not same. And then it uses 0 to 9, our mathematical digits. Then it uses some different signs. You can see, let me zoom in. Yep. Then it use signs. It's exclamation mark, star, plus, divide, double quotation marks, and all of these you can look at. And the blank here means space, the space. Then we can go down and identifiers and keywords. You can read this as well. Identifiers are specific words in C languages. Identifiers are names given to various program elements such as variable, functions, and array rules. Identifiers, let me make it clear. Identifiers can start with alphabets, capital or small, and it can start with underscore. Can contains alphabet, numbers, and underscores. Cannot contain any special characters such as dollar, %, blank space, etc. Cannot use keywords as identifiers. Valid and invalid identifiers. So what identifiers are good for? For example, we can do this on Xcode as well. So let's assign some identifiers, and let me tell you what are identifiers, to be honest. So Xcode, and this is our coding in our C language IDE. First of all, we have to include stdio.h. This is the most important header file for our program. Then we have to write int main and curly bracket and simple brackets. Then after curly brackets we have to write our statements. Here int is a keyword, and we can write any identifier. For example, we can say YouTube is an identifier, and we can initialize it with a value of 0, which means YouTube, this whole word contains a value of 0, and this is the identifier for the value of 0. And integer is a keyword, which is the kind of the word YouTube. So let's go back to our table, and valid and invalid identifiers. So valid identifiers are X, that means a capital X, Y12, which can be anything, you can write anything, sum underscore 1, and these all are the valid identifiers. You can see here it's written int, which is a keyword of C language, just we used here, but there is a difference between these both keywords. C language always contain keywords in small language, which means if you write int in small words or in small caps, it means it's a keyword. But if you write same int in capital words, int, that becomes an identifier. You can just make one word capital and that will be an identifier, because the first that would be an identifier because the first I is capital and now the int contains a value of 0. But if you write small I, then this whole becomes a keyword. So C language is case sensitive. You can't use small words, whole of the word in a small caps if you are going to assign it as an identifier. Anything in this word must be capital or must be changed than the specific keywords of C language. You can see if I make a slight different change, the code changes and now it's not an keyword, it's an identifier. So we'll go back to our YouTube key identifier. So now we will check what makes a word an invalid identifier. Fourth, which means 4th, the first character must be a letter or underscore. So we can go here and tell you YouTube is a valid identifier, and if we will add 4, now it's became an invalid identifier, because int will initialize 4 and it makes an error because 4 is not a valid identifier. You cannot start a identifier with a math digit, with a digit. Then using double quotation marks will make an identifier invalid. Just for example, double quotation marks and it goes red, which means now this is not identifier. This is not an error, but this is not an identifier anymore if you use double quotation mark. It has to be white to be an identifier. It must be white to be an identifier. The color code can be different for almost every IDE, and you can change the color code as well, but just for this color code of my Xcode, white represents an identifier. Now order /no. Now this slash is not slash, it's dash. This dash is an illegal character for an identifier. You cannot use dash as an identifier. You cannot give spaces between identifiers, and you cannot use keywords as identifier, as I told you before. Just check out. Dash does not change the color, but it gives you an error on the left side that this is not an identifier. Space will change it. I know the space won't give any error, but it says you must do this to make the line work, because there cannot be any space between identifier. If you give a space, there could be two different identifiers. Now we will move to keywords. Keywords are some specific words that C language reserves for its compiler or to be used as the commands. These are few keywords. You cannot use a keyword in as an identifier or anything else. Auto, break, case, double, else, enum, float, short, all of these are keywords. We're going to use all of these to write programs, short or long programs. Do, while, float, if, go to, these are all keywords and are used in C language. Now we move to our C constants. There are 4 different kinds of constant: integer, floating point, character, and string. They are different kinds. They have different characteristics. So now these are some rules, which means commas and blank spaces cannot be included within the constants. The constant can be preceded by a dash sign if desired. The value of the constant cannot exceed specified minimum or maximum bound for each data type. These bounds will vary from C compiler to another. So this means that if you're going to assign a short integer a value of bigger than 32,000 something, it will give you error. For example, the maximum range is about 32,200 and something, and if you assign something bigger than this to a short integer is a kind of integer, that will give an error because it cannot store a word bigger than 32,000 and some. For example, you cannot store a value of 50,000 in a short integer. That's it's bound, it's physical limitation or hardware limitation. Now then comes the integer constants. Valid integer constant can be 0, 1, 7, 4, 3, 5 to 4. Invalid integer constant, a comma cannot be an integer. A digit with a number with a comma between it cannot be an identifier, cannot be an valid integer in C language. Dog cannot be used in a integer because if you add dot, 0 means decimal are only valid in floating point constants. These are the constants which can store numbers with decimal, and then dashes are illegal in floating point in integers constant, and 0 before 0 word as the first digit of a number cannot be a legal valid integer constant. Then came our floating point constants, which can be 0, 0.0, 1.0, it can be anything, and you can write 0.0 e-3 or 2e-8. These are all legal valid constants, floating point constant. Now came some invalid one. As in integers, you cannot use comma in floating point constant. Single word cannot be a floating point constant because this single digit is an integer, not a floating point constant. Using decimal in the power, in the exponent of a floating point is not valid. You can use just integer values after 2e or after e plus. It can be 2e plus 10, but it cannot be 2e plus 10.2 because you cannot use a decimal in exponent. It's a legal rule. You cannot use decimal in exponent even if you're using a calculator or in real life, because there cannot be any 0.2 digits. It can be 10 digits, 11 digits, but there cannot be 10.2 digits in any number. So there cannot be no sign between this because space is not a legal constant, and this function in this statement is not complete. 2e plus what? It's negative or positive. It's on the left side or the right side of a number after decimal. Then came character constants. There are many character constants. You can use single quotation mark to assign a character constant. We can move to our IDE, and here we can assign char a single quotation mark character A, character B. Now in A we can store capital single quotation mark capital A single quotation mark. Now I don't know what, and double semicolon. Now it's stored. Now it should change the color, but I don't know why it doesn't change the color. Using single quotation mark will change the word into an string, into a character. Now A is a character. If you will print it, it will print A. It can be only A, and both will be a character. A character is only a single word. If you will add A, it will become a string. It's no more a character. And you can see there is an error given on the left side that it's not a character, it's a string. Now you have to be one. It can be capital or small, but it has to be a single word. Now we'll zoom out, we'll go back, and we will see some of the example. So a character constant can be AX3 $, or a space. And you can see 3, you will be confused that 3 is an integer, but even writing 3 in single quotation marks will make it a character 3. So it won't give an error, but if you write 3A, it will give you an error. So this means that anything within single quotation mark, and it can be a single word, not more than a single word, not more than a single digit of word, will be a character if it's in a single quotation mark. So A got a ASCII value of 65, X got a ASCII value of 120, and so on. So you can just use ASCII values, American Standard Code, for interchange value, or you can use alphabets as commands or stuff. Sorry if I just confused you. Then we go to string. I hope you just understand what character is. My mind is quite messed up right now. Now there comes the string constants. String constants are saved in double quotation marks, and they can be almost anything. They can include brackets, space, signs, symbols, digits, floating point, anything, but they must be in double quotation marks. You don't need to initialize a string. You just have to add double quotation marks in front of anything, and it will be a string. For example, if I written A is equals to hello, then you can just add double quotation marks and just erase this, and now this all becomes a string. And if you know some commands of C language, you can just print this up, print, close, and now this command will print A is equals to hello on the screen as a string. You don't need to initialize strings, you just have to add double quotation marks, and that's the whole initialization. Then comes the symbolic constants, and you can use hashtag to define them, and you can just define anything a value. All you have to do is the syntax for this is you have to write hashtag, and then you have to define, you have to write define, then you have to write the name and then the formula. So for example, if you want to define anything, you have to write, let me zoom in, you have to write hashtag define, then you have to write for example, if you want to define pi, the value of pi as 0.24, I think it can be different, it can be 0.5. So now the value of pi is defined as 0.5, and now in all of your program you can just write like a multiplies or plus pi, and it will just, or you can just write 2 plus pi and the answer will be 2.5. This is not the right syntax of writing the code, but just to give you understanding of what it is defining a symbolic constant is. So we come back and you can see, right, oh sorry, and define pi is 3.15, 3.14, and that just slipped out of my mind at that moment. And that's all for symbolic constant. These are few graphs. C data types. Primary data types are character, integer, float, double, void. Integers are, we have just read about characters, integer, float. Doubles are floating points with a larger limit, or you can say a 64-bit floating point value is called a double. And voids are things with no value or elements without any value. Then came the secondary data types. Secondary data types are made by primary data types, and just we have to make some changes, and then we can make secondary data types. So that's all for the first part of our C fundamentals. We will understand more about C language fundamentals in the very next video. That's all for this video. Thanks all for watching. Hope this video helped. For more such videos, subscribe to my channel and keep watching and share the video. Meet you in the very next video. Take care. Allah Hafiz.